What's the graps, YouTube? Immediately off to a controversial start. What's going on, YouTube? It's your boy Jack the Jobber, and I'm here because it's my favourite time of the bloody week. It's time to look at each and every one of my 10 wrestlers of the week, plus also a few honourable mentions. Now, just before we begin, I want to point out that this wasn't a week where there was like a big defining WWE show or NXT show or New Japan show. They were just pockets of good wrestling scattered all around. So I've just sort of looked all over, sought out some of the best wrestlers from around the world and plopped them in order. But it's a week where it's not all of the obvious names that we see week from week. Not a lot of the regulars are here this week. There's a few new faces, there's a few that haven't been on the list for a while, and there's a few who haven't accrued that many points over the course of the year. So it's a bit of an interesting one, and I hope you enjoy it. But let's crack on with my honourable mentions. There's a lot to get through, so I'm going to read them off. First of all, Phoenix, who's turned heel on Lucha Underground, sort of, but I'm not really certain what's going on. I think Aerostar took him back in time, and then he came back, and now he's heel because something got confused in the journey, or it's weird. It's Lucha Underground, it just worked with it. He's turned heel, sort of, but not really, but yes, he has. In the past, future, now. The Golden Lovers, Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi, had a wonderful tag team match in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Buddy Murphy and Kalisto had a great match on 205 Live. Momo Watanabe and Hazuki went to a time limit draw in Stardom, the night where there were 2 time limit draws actually, and we might hear a little bit more about one of them a little bit later on. Daisuke Sekimoto had a wonderful match against Tyler Bate in Fight Club Pro, and Austin Aries and Fowler Barr had a very entertaining Impact main event for the title, which Austin Aries retained through slightly dubious means, but well done to Fowler Barr for actually rising to the occasion, putting on a very entertaining, good main event of wrestling for a weekly television show, and well done to Austin Aries for helping him through it as well. Lovely stuff from Impact there. But now let's crack on with my number 10, and that man is Shaney Boy Strickland. Shane Strickland is like the new ace of Evolve, I guess, now that Matt Riddle's gone and Keith Lee's gone as well, and all their kind of bigger names have progressed to NXT. So now it's Shane Strickland's time, and he is certainly making the most of it. There were 2 Evolve shows because they do things in doubles quite a lot. They run one show one night, and then the very next night they run a second show. The first show this time wasn't that amazing by Evolve standards, but the second show was really good, and it was main evented by an Evolve Championship match with Shane Strickland pitting the belt against the challenger Tracy Williams. Now, despite having a name like one of the other mums at My Mum's Coffee Mornings, Tracy Williams is actually a very impressive, very menacing pro wrestler, very impactful, but Shane Strickland was the standout performer for me on the night. He retained his Evolve Championship and looks to be solidifying a reign which could go on for a very long time. He's very popular, he's very good, and he's got that star quality as well. He's got charisma and a bit of groove about him. Why am I dancing? He's a heel as well, so he's not going to be dancing all the time. He's really good, is my point. He's really good. Moving on now to number 9, Jungle Kiona, or Kiona. I put her in a few weeks ago, and I can't remember how to pronounce her surname, but she's a really impressive wrestler over in Stardom, where the 5-star Grand Prix is ongoing. It's like the G1 Climax, but for Stardom. So it's all women's wrestling. There's been some wonderful matches, and that one I talked about in the honourable mentions, the other 15-minute time limit draw, was by Jungle Kiona against, forgive me for having to read this out, but I don't want to butcher the pronunciation, Utami Hayashishita. That sounds about right. Now, in my mind, Utami is a little bit like Stardom's Ronda Rousey. She's a young, I think she's only just turned sort of 19 or 20. She's a very young wrestler, but has incredible natural ability, a natural flair for the showmanship of wrestling, but at the same time isn't that crisp yet. You can still tell that she's a little bit green in the ring, but Jungle Kiona kind of marshaled her to a wonderful 15-minute time limit draw here. It was just really good stuff from Jungle. I think she's, for me, the standout performer in Stardom. I'm not too familiar with a lot of the roster, but after watching her, I was like, wow, that's actually incredible stuff. She loves a powerbomb, she loves a big lariat, she's very hard-hitting, very brutal, and I really like her. She's just a good old-fashioned, nose-busting, bludgeoning, menacing heel, but not a dastardly heel, just a hard heel, like just a one that you don't want to mess with. So yes, 2 points for my number 9 this week, Jungle Kiona. She's really good. I think, for anyone who hasn't checked out Stardom yet, it is some of the best women's wrestling in the world. Their roster has some insanely talented women, from the likes of, Jungle to Momo Watanabe to former stars such as Io Shirai and Kairi Sane, who were both like the 2 leading lights of Stardom before they moved to WWE. And if you've ever seen a match featuring Kairi Sane or Io Shirai, you'll know that they're some of the best wrestlers in the world. And there's a lot more talent bubbling away under the surface in Stardom. It's actually a scarily good hotbed of wrestling talent in Japan. Number 8, now I want to talk about LAX. I don't know if they do that. I imagine they don't. LAX have been on a little bit of a tear this year. This has been kind of their breakout year, I want to say, for the New York boys. And I want to focus on Santana because he's been taking part in some amazing tag team matches recently. There was a few Progress shows that hadn't yet gone out. They all took place, but they didn't go out on demand until very recently, which is why he's being included this week. And honestly, even before anyone had seen the match, there was rumblings and reports online of an insane tag team match between CCK, Chris Brooks and Jonathan Gresham, and LAX, Santana and Ortiz. And I watched the match, and it was spectacular. It was a very good tag team match, and one of the men I was most impressed with, which is why Ortiz sadly isn't on the list, but one of the men I was most impressed with was Santana. Santana was great in this match. He was taking the bulk of the moves, I guess, and dishing out most of LAX's offense, but at the same time, there were bodies flying everywhere all the time, so it was kind of hard to keep track. But I came away from the match thinking, wow, Santana is legitimately excellent. That's not again to take away from Ortiz. I just think that Santana is really one to watch. He wrestled incredibly well to the point where after the match, Jim Smallman called LAX back into the ring, even though they lost, and basically put them over massively. He said, look guys, I've been promoting wrestling for quite a while now and I've been watching it for most of my life. That was one of the best tag matches I've ever seen. And I was like, for me, it's not quite on that tier. It's maybe the tier below. It's like a spectacular tag team match, but maybe not on the level of like one of my favorite ones, The Revival versus DIY, for example. But it was still up there. It was still very, very good. And Santana, for me, was one of the standout guys. He was absolutely excellent. Not to mention the fact that LAX have been tearing it up over an Impact, especially with their current feud against the OGs, even though that feud has been turned a little bit into a figure of fun on the internet by the fact that in kayfabe, a child was run over in the storyline, which was a little bit far-fetched for my liking. But hey, if there's any way you can be a little bit far-fetched, it's surely the pro wrestling industry. But well done, Santana. Wonderful performance. Also had the privilege of seeing him wrestle live at the Manchester Wrestling Media Con this past weekend. And again, he and Ortiz put on some brilliant matches. So great stuff from the Impact boys, especially Santana. Number 7, and Sam Driver's going to be a very happy man indeed, because it's none other than the Stone Pitbull, Tomohiro Ishii. Speaking of fantastic tag matches, this past weekend at a Road to Destruction show, which for New Japan is kind of like the WWE equivalent of like the Raws leading up to a pay-per-view. That's kind of WWE's version of the Road to Destruction shows. So not shows where you'd necessarily expect to see wonderful tag team matches or wonderful matches of any description, just solid storyline building kind of stuff. But this was a spectacular match. It was a tag team match pitting Chaos against the Golden Lovers, and the two representatives of Chaos were Tomohiro Ishii and Will Osprey, taking on, of course, Kenny Omega and Kota Ibushi. This match was insane. It was wrestled at a bit of a higher pace than Ishii is probably used to, given his usual style of battering opponents' faces in rather than running around hitting flips and stuff all the time, but he definitely caught up to speed, and in the end for me was one of the major stars of this match. Ishii was running around breaking up pinfalls, dishing out lariats and brainbusters and big forearm strikes, and was just generally very, very good, as he often is when he steps inside the ring. Maybe one of the most consistent wrestlers in the world today. At the same time, I feel as though there could be better things in store for Ishii next week, because of course he has that title shot against Kenny Omega, and it's a match that many people can actually see Ishii winning, which I think would be a bold decision by New Japan, considering their whole global expansion thing, put the belt on a Westerner to try and really bring in the Western audience, but at the same time, you can't argue that Ishii doesn't deserve it, man. He absolutely deserves to be IWGP Heavyweight Champion, and even if he doesn't next week, I'd love for him to get the belt at some point in the future. So yes, a nice little collection of points there for Ishii, but potentially a lot more in store next week. In fact, he could well be Wrestler of the Week next time around. Next up, number 6, don't rip my balls off, it's Will Osprey. Now, to be honest, right, Will Osprey was also in the tag match, and on Twitter afterwards and online and in the reviews and everything, everyone was buzzing about Will Osprey. This is before I'd even seen the match. Then I went to watch it and I was like, don't make me give him more points on Wrestlers of the Week. And I watched it and I couldn't argue, because he was fantastic. It's Will Osprey, man. I don't know what else to say. And unfortunately, for those of you who think I give him too many points, there is a 4-man tournament coming up for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship, and if he wins that, that'll probably be some more points, because he's in there with some great wrestlers as well. He's in there with Kushida, Skrull, and I think Bushi as well. So I mean, I'm really sorry, but that might just be what happens. But for the meantime, Osprey's got himself a nice little collection of points, and the main story of Osprey's role in the match was the showdown with Kota Ibushi, a match that suddenly everyone really wants to see. I get the feeling that Osprey is about to jump, or really wants to jump, into the heavyweight division, and if he does so, there's just a whole nother bunch of matches, y'all, that he could potentially just like pick up massive opponents for. Naito, for example, Ibushi, obviously, Kenny Omega. Why did I say another? I'm not from the South. of America. Number 5, the big strong boy himself, even though he's only about that tall. Tyler Bate, a fantastic wrestler and one of the most promising young stars in the wrestling world today. In fact, not just one of the most promising young stars, one of the most promising wrestlers around. He had a wonderful main event match at Fight Club Pro against Daisuke Sekimoto. Now, if you've seen Sekimoto, I first did over WrestleMania weekend when he picked up quite a few points in that big bumper edition where there were 20 points up for grabs. He picked up quite a few points for his efforts over WrestleMania weekend, and if you've seen him, he's just a big, thick man. Like, much bigger than Tyler Bate, who himself is obviously very built and very strong. But it was the sort of matchup where there was definitely a physical offset, and Tyler Bate really used that to his advantage. The crowd all got behind him and put on one of his best performances in recent memory, I think, which isn't selling him short because Bate has a lot of great matches, but this is one of the best I can remember for quite a while. Bate, like Ishii, also has a chance to pick up a whole hatful of points in the near future, given the fact that he is, I assume, main eventing Progress's Wembley show, because he's the #1 contender to Volta's Progress Championship, and that'll be a real David versus Goliath clash. Even though we've seen him as a heel in British Strong Style as well, when they were all heels, I think that Tyler Bates' real strength comes when he's a babyface. He's got quite a babyface moveset. He does airplane spins, he does dives, he does a thing where he does that and fakes one punch and then goes, oh, just get in, bang, and then hits them with the other one. And at the same time, I think that also he kind of just looks kind of like an old-timey strongman type wrestler thing. So I think he's got it all. He's very versatile, and I think, yeah, there's a lot of points coming his way in the future. I'm sure he's delighted. I'm sure it's not titles that he's after or anything like that. It's points on Wrestlers of the Week. Next up, a big bloody newcomer to the list, and it's one half of CCK. No matter which incarnation CCK takes, usually this is one of the two men in the ring. It's Chris Brooks. I've already mentioned that wonderful tag team match against LAX in Progress, but also I think that Chris Brooks had a fantastic match that I was there to see live at Rev Pro. It was himself and Jonathan Gresham against Volta and Timothy Thatcher, Ring Camp, and it was just really good. For those who haven't seen Chris Brooks and maybe aren't familiar with his style, he's a very high-octane, modern British wrestler. When he's a heel, he likes to slow things down. He's very technically gifted as well. He can do submissions, sometimes takes chewing gum out of his mouth and tries to put it in his opponent's ear, which I'm not too keen on. Well, it gets heat, I suppose. Makes me angry, so good healing. But when he's a babyface, Brooks has all the trappings of a modern British wrestler as well. Really good at getting the crowd behind him, and really good at tag team wrestling, crucially too. So for two excellent tag team matches, Brooks shotguns his way onto the list with a nice big sack full of points. Also, unfortunately, I have to report that I think this is true. I think that he's been injured sadly recently and will therefore miss out on the Battle of LA over in California, which I think takes place this weekend. So he's been replaced, but it's very unfortunate because he could have really gathered a few more points, but also in a more general sense really got his brand across on a more global scale. So get well soon, Chris, and congratulations for all the good wrestling this week. Delicious wrestling. Next up, the winner of Rev Pro's British J Cup and one of the hottest rising stars despite being North American on the UK independent scene, El Fantasma, or ELP as he is popularly known. Fantasma sounds like a luchador from decades ago, doesn't he? But he's actually not. He is an unmasked, very pretty blonde man and loves to do high-flying craziness. Likes to walk about on the ropes, likes to come off the top with big moves and that sort of thing, but at the same time also knows how to slow it down and get the crowd on side. He's a very charismatic guy, comes out of dubstep, what a fun-loving dude. But more importantly this week, he won the British J Cup over in Rev Pro, winning in a fatal four-way elimination style main event against Kushida, Rocky Romero and Rich Swann. Before this match, I'd only really seen El Fantasma wrestle a couple of times here and there. He was in Defiant Wrestling's Ringmaster tournament, which I think he was the runner-up in, so he's obviously got great stamina if he can go long into these tournaments that take place over one night. At the same time, I saw him live at an Attack show, which are sometimes a little bit silly, and he came into the ring and told everyone that Bigfoot was real. Now, I mean, I can't agree with that. I don't think Bigfoot's real, but if you want to believe that, El Fantasma, you go ahead, mate. Didn't get many points that week, but he cut out the Bigfoot nonsense this time around, and look where he's finished. He's finished third on Wrestlers of the Week. Now it's time to take a trip, right? Because back in the day, let me tell you a little story first. Back in the day, Ring of Honor was the ultimate indie promotion. It was kind of like what PWG is now. It was the place where everyone went, all the little smarks on the internet would go to look at the best wrestling in the world. There was AJ Styles, there was Danielson, there was Samoa Joe, there was CM Punk, there were all kinds of crazy talented guys taking part in Ring of Honor. And since then, Ring of Honor's kind of become a little bit more mainstream, and it's not really the cool indie place where all the hot talent goes. It's a little bit more polished. It's more like the king of the indies, I guess. In fact, you could argue it's not really regarded as an independent promotion anymore. With that in mind, I think Ring of Honor has kind of been lacking a little bit in terms of Wrestlers of the Week points. We haven't been over to Ring of Honor too often in terms of point allocation, but this week, Jay Lethal defended his Ring of Honor World Championship in a main event on TV, not even at a pay-per-view, against Jonathan Gresham in a half-hour, 2 out of 3 falls match, which I'm happy to report was absolutely fantastic. So that's why my number 2 is Jay Lethal. I think that he is a real throwback in terms of a champion in 2018 and in recent years as well. He's already had one very long Ring of Honor World Championship reign, and despite people often getting sick of it and saying this reign's going on too long, he defended the belt in some of the best matches, the best title matches of every year that he held the belt. Same as going for his title reign this time around. He's still having fantastic matches. The one at All In was a little bit more of a comedy match against Flip Gordon, but it was entertaining, but he really got his wrestling boots back on for this match against Jonathan Gresham. I think Lethal's one of those guys who you often forget how good he is just because he's been around forever now, and he's still younger than you think. I think he's still in his early to mid 30s, and he's still absolutely spot on. So slick, so versatile at everything he does. He can fly, he can do technical stuff, he can do submissions, he can strike and brawl. He's just a very good, well-rounded pro wrestler. Kind of like if you're on Football Manager and you wanted a utility man who can play in midfield, drop a little bit deep, go out on the wing, maybe even throw him into an attacking midfielder berth if he's got, a bit of a weaker opponent on the day. That's the person you want to get for your Football Manager team, is Jay Lethal. It made sense in my head. And now it's time to take a look at my Wrestler of the Week, and I imagine, probably, the shortest Wrestler of the Week so far in terms of physical height, and that man is Jonathan Gresham. Jonathan Gresham has been everywhere recently. On that Progress tag match that kind of dropped on demand recently but actually took place in New York a couple of weeks ago, he was 1/4 of the excellent match alongside Chris Brooks against LAX. And how many times have I done that in this video so far? Like 4, 5? Gresham was really, really good in that match. He was healing it up. He was like hitting them in the balls, in the cock and balls with the back of his hand, like a little cheeky tyke. But also, he had a very, very good tag match, as I mentioned, alongside Chris Brooks against Volta and Timothy Thatcher, which I saw with my own eyes this past weekend. And as well, a third reason he's Wrestler of the Week, he had that wonderful title match against Jay Lethal, 2 out of 3 falls, half an hour long, and potentially a match of the year contender, even though he lost. The score was 2-1. He did score a fall over the current Ring of Honor World Champion, which I think puts Gresham in good stead for maybe another title shot further down the line. Now, Gresham has his haters, obviously, because he's quite a small guy, but at the same time, he's really well built. He's got an excellent moveset. He is strong. He's not just a speedy guy or a technical guy. He is strong as well for such a small guy. And I think that shouldn't hold him back at all in 2018. I mean, we see shorter guys in WWE now all the time, so I don't see why there's any reason that WWE wouldn't want to pick up Jonathan Gresham in the near future, and I certainly wouldn't be surprised if that was the case. So Gresham, well done on a hatful of excellent matches this week, and well done for becoming a first time, I think, he's never been Wrestler of the Week before, a first time Wrestler of the Week. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the league table. Will Osprey has extended his lead a little bit again over Zack Sabre Jr., but remember, it's Omega versus Ishii next week, which means that Omega could be picking up a whole hatful of points. And indeed, Ishii could as well, who sits there in 12th place now. Everything else has remained pretty much the same in the top 25 because we've had so many newcomers and maybe lower down wrestlers gaining points on the list this week, with the exception of Tyler Bate, whose Fight Club Pro main event has pushed him level with Minoru Suzuki. And that's a match, actually, that I'd really like to see as well. So that's it for now. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic.com, and well done to Jonathan Gresham and everyone else who rounded out the top 10 of this week's Wrestlers of the Week. If you want to, you can follow me on Twitter at JackTheJobber. You can follow all of us at Cultaholic, and don't forget as well, you can check out our Patreon if you want, patreon.com/Cultaholic. And if you haven't already, very importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and to join us.